Greetings, citizens! You're now trapped in the NerdCage with your hosts Marq and Jay. We hope you have a smashing good time.
If you have not watched Wonder Woman 84 yet, do not listen to this audio only. If you don't mind being spoiled, then go ahead. This is a spoiler discussion of Wonder Woman 84. That being said, hello and welcome. That is right, you're trapped in NerdCage Live. This ain't just a reaction show, but a debate show and a live discussion on everything that makes people like you and I tick. So thank you for joining us tonight. Please hit that like button and subscribe. I'm your co-host, Jay St. G, coming to you live from Syracuse, New York, and always with me, the warrior from Wakanda, the fiend from Louisville, my man, Marq Withers. What's shaking, man?
Hey, what's going on, man? And Merry Christmas and Merry Day After Christmas to everyone. I have been very excited to watch this new Wonder Woman movie, and now that it's out on HBO Max, you and I have both had a chance to kind of take a look at this. Let's dig in, man. Let's talk about this, spoilers and all. You know, what did you think about this movie? Again,
if anyone hasn't seen our rapid review video, go ahead and check that out. I liked the movie. I gave it a solid 7.5 out of 10. I'm still processing it. Again, I liked it a lot, but this movie has its problems, and I have my nitpicks. And for the love of me, I cannot put this movie above the first one. But this is still one of the better movies of 2020. And then, you know, I feel like this was the movie we needed this holiday and for this year, for that matter. And I'm hoping this is going to lead, you know, I'm really looking forward to this whole HBO Max movie lineup moving forward. But yeah, I definitely enjoyed the film, but not without its problems, man. So, Marq, what you got?
Yeah, I mean, I'm with you. I mean, I really wanted to love this movie. I mean, as anybody who knows me knows, I'm a huge Wonder Woman fan. I have been ever since I was 5 years old. I was incredibly stoked to see this movie, but it really kind of fell flat for me. I didn't like it as much as I wanted to. I didn't hate it, and I didn't think it was a bad film, but I expected a little bit more out of Patty Jenkins, especially
we're holding
after
this
the movie.
Very, very high standards.
Yeah, so. Especially after the movie she gave us in 2017. I was blown away by that, and I really thought we were going to get a continuation of that level of excitement with this, but I just didn't really feel like it was there 100%.
Yeah, to tag on to what you just said, like for me, the first half of the movie was really good. It still had some problems there, but the opening scene, the opening flashback, and everything else, that first half of the movie was damn solid. And for whatever reason, the second half of the movie, I just feel like I don't know. I feel like I wasn't watching the same movie during the second half.
I agree. I mean, that was, you know, I think you nailed it. I think that for me, it really felt almost like two different movies. Like the first part of it, you know, especially with the whole 80s vibe of it, the whole feel of 1984, as someone who was very much alive and conscious during that era, I think that they nailed it. I think they really did a good job of sort of bringing that year to life and bringing the energy that came from the 80s, that sense of excess, the bright colors, the fun aspect of it. I think they really did an excellent job of that. I think the action was really strong in those particular scenes early on, but that somewhere in the second or third act, it sort of becomes almost a different movie for me. Just even the color palette changes a little bit to where it has a completely different feel, and it kind of threw me off. It felt a little unbalanced.
And I want to point out, I love the color palette in this movie, what they used in this instead of the first one. The first one had like a dark, you know, vibe that, you know, it was World War I, a little bit more somber, whereas this one was bright, you know, bright like my goddamn hair. Like it was bright, and like, you know, colorful and vivid. Like, okay, this does feel like, you know, a contrast. This does feel like the 80s, you know, Diana in the 80s, which was cool. Now, let's get right into it. When Steve Trevor returns, okay, so we find out he's brought back. I mean, this was leaked out there long before the movie came out, that he was brought back by the artifact, the stone that grants wishes from the gods there. Here's the one problem. I look when Steve Trevor came back, it was awesome, and I was laughing, when he was adjusting to, being in the 80s and all that. But I had one major problem when he first comes out. She asked, "What was the last thing you remember?" Or, "Oh, I remember being in the air and this, and that." Wouldn't you think the first thing he would say to Diana, what happened with the war? What happened after I died? Like, what happened?
Right.
He didn't say anything about the end of the war or anything that happened post World War I. That bothered me because I thought that would have been the first thing he'd want to know.
Yeah. Yeah. And I thought about that too. I thought that, what it reminded me of was sort of the scenes in the end of Captain America and sort of the beginning of the Avengers, I guess, where Steve Rogers kind of wakes up in this sort of fake hospital that's set up by S.H.I.E.L.D. And the very first thing he asks is like, well, what happened? Like, did we win? Like, you know what I mean? Like, but Steve Trevor never thinks to ask that. Maybe he just assumes because of where he is and how things are that, okay, well, we obviously won. But I would still, if I time jumped, 65 years, I would want to know, like, well, what happened in that 65 years? And he doesn't really ever bother to ask that. He only ever assk about the aesthetics of, like, how things look and how people are dressed.
Yeah, I found that a little off-putting. Like, I mean, I thought, maybe if they were just thinking, maybe I'm wondering if there's gonna be like a deleted scene that will get in the Blu-ray eventually. That will, like, maybe there were scenes that will explain him asking. But like I said, and maybe they just didn't want to like recap the whole first movie. I don't know, but like I just saw, like I said, if it was me, if I was Steve Trevor and I went out the way I did, and then I woke up finding myself, 70 years later, I mean, like I said, I would want to ask, like, well, what happened to this so-and-so and so-and-so and Etta and everybody else? What happened with the war? Like, what happened? Like, I mean, I would have so many questions for Diana. Like, and Diana is a wealth of knowledge. I mean, she's been alive for so long, and I just find it really weird that they just kind of glossed over that.
Right. Well, they did show that picture of Diana and an older Etta in her apartment. And I was kind of expecting to see an older version of Etta Candy somewhere in at least one scene, and maybe have, her and Steve Trevor, like a scene where they reunite and they kind of talk. But that, unfortunately, we didn't get that.
Yeah, no, one thing I do appreciate what you just mentioned, I'm so glad you mentioned it, because this is one thing I did appreciate about this movie. One of the problems I did have with the first film, I won't call it a problem, but like Etta Candy was supposed to be Diana's like best friend.
Right.
Like, and we never really got that relationship in the first movie at all.
Right.
They were just together, and obviously in the beginning there where she was trying on the dresses and all that. At least in this movie, when we see that picture of an older Etta, I'm like, okay, great. So they established that she kept her relationship with her after the war and this and that. So I appreciate they at least did that in this movie.
I agree. I just wish that we had gotten a little bit more of that character. I mean, even just a single scene with her in it would have been great. I think it would have kind of added something to the story. But unfortunately, we didn't get it. Maybe we'll get it in a deleted scene, though, like you said.
Yeah, now going to, I guess we can switch gears a little bit here. Let's go to Kristen Wiig. I thought she knocked it out of the park. I mean, I'm so used to seeing her in comedies, so I've never really seen her in a serious, I wouldn't call this a serious role, but like a non-comedic role.
Yeah, more of a
non-comedic role. I really liked the fact that she had a friendship with Diana. I thought that was really, really cool. And like I said, I sympathized with her. Like, she didn't want to be this dorky gal. She wanted to be, like Diana. She wanted she wanted attention. She wanted, she wanted to be strong. She wanted to be able to do, she wanted to be Diana. I really like that, the envious that they threw in there. And and this is what I appreciate about this movie more than the first one, and with both villains. But we see a proper story arc for both characters, especially Cheetah, where she started off as this lovable, likable, dorky gal, and then we saw her become this unlikable person, this heartless person, this mean-spirited person, and just became power hungry and just loved, the sheer power, and she wanted more and more and more, and it corrupted her. I love that aspect. That's one thing this movie nailed better than the first one.
See, I will disagree with you to a certain aspect. I really didn't like this origin for Cheetah. You know, I thought that it was, I thought that it made, it sort of cheapened the sort of Barbara Minerva character that I'm familiar with in the comics. And all of the supporting characters around her seemed very two-dimensional. They seemed very much like, okay, well, this person is a dork and I'm not attracted to this person, and therefore I have every right to treat her like garbage. But now, after a day where she's totally dressed differently, she's carrying herself differently, she seems wittier, now I like her, and now I'm going to do everything that I can to please her. I think that in my opinion, it's sort of a failure in character development. We don't see any gradual development of her as far as like the corrosive aspects of her character, as far as like, well, you know, we know that the stone takes away something from you, and in her case, it took away her humanity. Well,
yeah.
In everyone else, it kind of took away what it was taking away gradually. Like with Diana, it's gradually taking away her powers, gradually taking away her strength. You know,
what other DC movie that we reviewed not that long ago did they shamelessly rip a page out of?
Obviously, Superman 2.
Thank you. I did not want to say that in our. I didn't want to say that in our regular review because I didn't want to spoil. If I said, "Oh yeah, this takes a page off Superman 2," I would have spoiled the whole movie.
Right. But you know, but you get what I'm saying. I mean, it's like, you know, even with Maxwell Lord, you know, like what it takes away from him is his health and his life force, but it's all gradual. And with Kristen Wiig's character, with Barbara, it's like 1 minute she is like the kindest person in the world, and then when she gets her abilities, well, now she's a jerk. Now she's like, you know, Peter Parker in Spider-Man 3. You know, and I just didn't really appreciate that. I thought that could have been fleshed out a little bit better.
But when a person gets power, it corrupts a person. Like if you give someone, not everyone should. You know, Diana is worthy of her powers because of the person that she is.
Right.
It wasn't the same for Kristen Wiig, because when she gets, you know, power and the desire to be liked and desire to be able to do what she wants with her strength and everything, like it changes her. The power changed. I that's why I liked it. I understand that you said it ruins the character and whatnot, but I like how they executed that personally.
Yeah, I just thought they could have dug a little bit deeper. I mean, it
I
didn't
just
ruin
thought
the movie
my
for me,
only thing was like, wasn't like in the comics, please correct me if I'm wrong, but in the comics, wasn't it like an experiment that went wrong?
Well, there's different iterations, but yeah, that's the most modern interpretation of it, is that
I was kind of hoping that like she was gonna experiment on herself to make her even more powerful, which caused her to become, you know, the Cheetah that we know. But
that's what I expected too.
That's what I was expecting. Instead, it was because it was all the wishes and everything from around the world that made her more powerful. I kind of didn't like that. I was kind of hoping that she was going to experiment on herself to make her even more powerful and whatever. Because at least they did acknowledge that she was a zoologist and a whole other, you know, other stuff that she studied and whatever. I'm like, damn, missed opportunity. I really thought she was going to experiment on herself to make her more powerful. That's what I was expecting at the end. But,
and that's kind of what I had hoped, was that they would do something to make this Cheetah aspect of her being sort of like an anthropomorphic cheetah, that would be something that was permanent, so that we
don't get me wrong, that the cheetah was awesome. I mean, I thought, I mean, I know with when she was fighting, the CGI looked a little off, but for the most part, like when all the other shots of Cheetah and how she moved and how she looked freaking rad. I really liked how she looked, and I thought, I know people complain they don't like seeing in the DC movies these villains in the dark and whatever, but in this aspect, I thought it was the right move to have Cheetah come out at night, so that way, you know, the bright, vibrant Cheetah didn't look weird in the daytime.
Right.
I actually like the fact that they fought in the dark, personally.
Right. And I can agree with that. I think that, you know, anytime you're doing any like CG heavy type stuff, it always works better in a darker setting with darker colors. And so I think that was 100% the right move. I didn't really have a ton of issues with how Cheetah looked. In fact, the close-up shots of Kristen Wiig, you know, as the full-blown Cheetah, I thought looked absolutely great, you know. It was just more just the way that she got those powers and how that was sort of fleshed out. I wish they had done that a little differently, because, you know, if everything comes off of the wish fulfillment, I mean, you're not really allowing that character a future, you know,
that's what I was going to get into.
Yeah. Within the DCEU.
She loses her powers completely.
Right.
And that let me down, because I kept thinking, in the back of my mind, I kept thinking, oh my God, I really hope Cheetah survives this movie and it leads to a Legion of Doom, because, you know, we all saw the Legion of Doom post-credit scene in the Joss Whedon Justice League.
Right.
And people were wondering, well, is Zack Snyder going to scrap that? He's not. We already know that Joe Manganiello and Jared Leto's Jokers are going to be in the Zack Snyder Justice League. And all I kept thinking to myself, oh my God, maybe they're gonna start, you know, throwing Easter eggs out there that there could be a Legion of Doom. Why not have Kristen Wiig survive this movie? You know, I'm not saying for her to make an appearance in Justice League, but I'm saying like they have an opportunity to form the full-blown Legion of Doom as we know it. Yeah. And now, if we do get that, we're not gonna get Cheetah.
Right. I mean, and how cool would it have been if we were to get that? Interestingly enough, I did read an article that IGN posted, if not yesterday, it was a couple days ago, where they kind of talked about what the ending of this movie could mean for Flashpoint and what it could mean for future DCEU movies. And one thing that they pointed out was that there's a possibility that not everybody rescinded their wish. And maybe some of the people who didn't rescind their wish actually turned out to be metas. And sort of like that's sort of how the metaverse sort of starts, you know. And so what if, you know, according to the article, of course, they're saying, well, you know, she no longer has like the full-blown Cheetah look, but what if she still has Cheetah's powers? What if she didn't rescind that wish? And maybe in the future we see that version of Cheetah alongside like a Giganta and a Long Shadow and like other DC Universe villains.
That's a good point. And this was, I'm glad you brought this up, because I personally felt like that this movie, I mean, it all could change, like you just said from the IGN article, but I felt like after I watched this movie, this movie doesn't change anything in the DCEU. Like, you could pluck this movie out of the DCEU and it doesn't change anything. They didn't leave anything for us, as far as we know. They didn't leave anything for us that would affect Diana moving forward, would affect, you know, the future of the DCEU, Batman, Superman, and all of them, the Justice League. There's nothing in this movie. This movie didn't bring anything to the table that would move the DCEU moving forward. I mean, at least, I know you hate Birds of Prey, but at least Birds of Prey gave us a Huntress and a Black Canary. Right. So, you know, we may very possibly see these characters come back in another movie. But in this Wonder Woman 84, there's nothing they could bring back. There's nothing that would change the narrative moving forward. So I just feel like this movie was just like filler. Looking at the whole DCEU catalog, chronologically speaking, I feel like this was just filler.
Right. And that may have been by design. I mean, I remember reading articles where they were talking about, you know, not relying so heavily on a shared cinematic universe, and that, you know, maybe when they were sort of writing Wonder Woman 84, the idea was that, okay, by the time this comes out, maybe these will all be standalone universes. And so I think that may have been the plan, is to just like, let's not connect this so heavily with the events of Batman versus Superman.
But Zack Snyder had his hands on this movie. He produced this. He was one of him and Deborah Snyder were producers on this movie. And I read an interview just a few days ago that Zack Snyder and Patty Jenkins have been collaborating this whole time with every movie. So, I mean, okay, so that's just another problem. Now, let's get into the other stuff I had problems with. I had a major problem. I hated the invisible jet scene.
Really? I actually liked it.
I hate it. Here's because, okay, look, I appreciate that they found an excuse to have Diana in an invisible. The problem is, I hate the fact that it's like, She just says, "Oh, I remember this power my father taught me. I could turn stuff invisible. Hold on, I don't know if I can do it." That came out of nowhere.
Right.
It came out of nowhere. It was. I was like, "Come on, dude." I'm sorry. I couldn't
actually.
Get
I actually like the origin of that quite a bit. I thought that if you're going to introduce an invisible jet, you have to have some origin for it. Like, why would the Themyscirans have a jet? Period. Like they wouldn't.
Yeah.
So you would have to have this jet exist somewhere in the modern world, like separate from Themyscira. And then how would you make it invisible? You know what I mean? Like she wouldn't, if it was invisible to start with, how would she find
invisibility powers? Like it just came out of nowhere. I didn't like that.
I hear you. But if you're going to have an invisible jet, I think that that setup is pretty much the only way you're going to do it. And to have the reasoning behind that be that, oh, we need to evade radar. Well, okay. Well, here's this trick that I figured out a long time ago, but I've only ever used it with a coffee cup. Like, so yeah, I get what you're saying.
What? Like, come on. I understand, like, the invisible jet was like a staple mark in Wonder Woman's origins and in the original comic timeline.
Mm-hmm.
I get that. It just felt so off-putting. But what was even more off-putting for me,
right,
was her learning to fly. I didn't like that. I didn't like how she was flying at the end of the movie. No, it didn't make sense at all, because why didn't she fly in Batman versus Superman, Justice League? Like we saw her like jump, like, against Doomsday. She had like super jumps and whatever.
Right.
But I didn't like the fact that they gave her all of a sudden they gave her the ability to fly. It just felt weird, and it didn't even look right. I'm sorry. When she was like using the lasso on the clouds and then on the lightning, that shit was dope.
Right.
I would have been cool. I'm cool with that. If she wants to, like, use the power of the gods to swing on the lightning to help her transport faster, and further, I can get behind that. But the fact that she just started to fly and you can hear, I learned Steve. I love, hear Steve Trevor say, "Oh yeah, I've mastered the way to handle the wind," and blah blah blah, and I'm just like, oh, come on. I'm sorry. I didn't like it. I didn't like that or the invisible jet. I'm sorry. It felt so off from the rest of the movie.
Right. I had smaller problems with that than I did with the armor. Like that was my big pet peeve. I felt like the golden armor served no real purpose. Like it didn't help her do anything that she couldn't do for herself anyway. And it was like almost like an excuse, because the Kingdom Come that armor exists in the Kingdom Come. Well, yeah, it's that, but it's an homage to the Kingdom Come comic book where she wears golden armor in that. But it doesn't really have any function. Like it didn't help her to become more powerful. It didn't help her to defeat Cheetah. Like, it was just basically this superfluous thing to kind of create a slightly different look for the character. And I just didn't really think that it was needed.
I guess, see, the golden armor didn't bother me. I thought it was cool. And, well, remember, they did kind of make, reference to it in the beginning of the film when they had those competitions with and whatever.
Right.
So, and by the way, I love that Themyscira flashback. That was really, really, really well executed. And it was really cool that same little girl came back too. Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. That was a nice little shout out to the original origin, for anybody who doesn't really know. In the original story that Marston wrote, Steve Trevor finds himself shipwrecked on Themyscira with the Amazonians, and there's a contest to decide who's going to take Steve Trevor back to America and back to his world. And Diana secretly enters this contest as a masked competitor and beats everyone. And then it's only after she's won that Olympics, if you can call it that, it's only after she's won that everybody realizes, oh, this is the princess. Yeah. So it was nice that they had that type of a scene in there as sort of an homage to Marston's original origin story, but they changed it a little bit because, you know, the events of the first film don't line up with that. So
okay, I guess we could shift gears to Maxwell Lord. Pedro Pascal I thought was great. And it's also, you know, I still think it's really rad that our friend Joey Z has a connection to him. So it was really cool. And it was kind of, and listen, I've never watched The Mandalorian, so this was really like my first, you know, true taste of seeing him in the major film. Speaking of Pedro Pascal, did you know this? So do you remember that Wonder Woman TV series pilot that was supposed to come out like a decade ago?
Sure, with Adrian Padalecki, I think her name is.
Yeah. Pedro Pascal was in that show.
Really? I didn't know that.
Yes.
Wow. So he already had the Wonder Woman connection.
I was just because I was watching what's that podcast I like so much there? The Weekly Planet. So the Weekly Planet did their Caravan of Garbage leading up to Wonder Woman, and they talked about the Wonder Woman you know, failed pilot and whatever. And yeah, Pedro Pascal was a major character in there, and I'm like, oh my God. So this was actually his second time in a Wonder Woman related project.
That's awesome. That's good to know.
Yeah. But anyway, he was I liked his character. Again, going back to the that this movie has, we have a villain arc, a proper arc that we never got in the first movie that they failed miserably with Ares. I love the fact we see this character kind of like fall from grace, in that he was power hungry. He wanted all the wishes and everything. I loved it, and the fact, and then at the end where he, you know, says, "I want my son back," and I loved it. What a great performance. I know he was a bad guy, but again, you can kind of sympathize for him a little bit, because he just wanted to make his son proud. He just wanted, his company was failing. He wanted to succeed, but again, the power hungry man, it corrupts him. And I loved his story. I thought he was a great villain. I
really like the actor. I'm a big Pedro Pascal fan. I have been ever since Narcos. You know, and of course, you know, I really enjoy his performance as Din Djarin in The Mandalorian. But I felt like his character missed the mark a little bit. I think he performed it wonderfully.
Yes,
but absolutely. I thought that there were a couple of things within his story that didn't work that well for me. If the caveat of this wish fulfillment is that you lose something, you lose the thing that is the dearest to you, then what he would have lost is his son, not his health. And so it's not that I had a big problem, like it didn't ruin the movie for me, but I felt like it was a missed opportunity for dramatic impact, for his son not to be directly affected by the choices that his father has made for this sort of semblance of greatness.
Yeah.
And so I think that's one of the, you know, if we're talking nitpicks, that would be one of mine.
Okay. Yeah, no, I can agree. I'm not gonna, like I said, I'm not gonna knock your opinion. I guess maybe I loved the performance so much that it didn't get to me really. Yeah. I just feel like what this movie succeeded where the first one failed was the villain story arcs. But I feel like we got two proper arcs to villains that we can sympathize for and root against, and you're rooting for Diana. Like, I was okay with it. Now, back to the Superman 2 thing. So Diana was losing her powers. Here's the thing. Again, going back to the emotional weight. Again, they ripped off Superman 2. Again, this movie just proves that Superman 2 is always going to test the testament of time.
Absolutely.
And more movies are going to, I bet you 10, 20, 30 years down the road, more movies, more comic films are going to rip off Superman 2. This one blatantly did.
Right.
The Steve Trevor thing. First and foremost, how did you feel, but going back to Steve Trevor, how did you feel about Steve Trevor, like, taking over the person's body and only Diana could really see Steve Trevor? What'd you think of that, honestly?
I hated it. I had a real problem with it. And here's why. All right, so if the idea is that Steve Trevor wakes up in this body that isn't his, and he sort of usurped a life that isn't his, what happens to that personality? What happens to that, like, person? You know what I mean? Do they just,
and his family and friends too?
Right. Yeah. I mean, he had a life, and you know what has happened to that guy, you know what I mean, and all the people around him. Does no one ever visit him? Did he not have a job that no one like called him and like wondered where he was? And like, you know, like these were like these unanswered questions that I guess it doesn't destroy the movie, but I couldn't help but think about these throughout the film. Like it seems anathema to what Diana would be like if she actually wished for this and, you know, inadvertently wished for it, but it happened. It would at least occur to her that like this isn't right because this is actually a living person like that actually exists, and it's unfair for me to take that person's life just so that I can have this other person who legitimately died years ago. So it didn't really work for me. I wish they had found another way to bring him back.
Yeah, if it was me in the writer's chair or the director's chair, I would have been like, I would have had Diana like wake up in bed and Steve Trevor just happened to be right there
Just
next
be
to
there.
him. Yeah. And then she would have gone out and got him clothes, got him this and that. I think that would have been better. Here's the thing. This is why this movie didn't carry the same emotional weight for me. Again, props to Gal Gadot and Chris Pine for their great performances, and again, tear-jerking moments. But that scene in the first movie where Diana, you don't hear what Steve Trevor says to Diana before he dies, and then afterwards you hear it.
Right.
That was really powerful, and it still to this day gives me the feels. It didn't work the same, nowhere near the same in this film. When Steve's like, "Listen, Diana, you have to go. You know what you got to do. You're gonna have to go." You know, and she, you know, and then she just leaves it here and runs away, and then starts getting her powers back. It didn't resonate the same.
Yeah, I agree. And I think that scene could have worked if it was placed in a different part of the story. Mm-hmm. Like, you know what I mean? And this is just me playing, you know, Monday morning quarterback or whatever. But if they had taken that same scene with the same lines and made that somewhere either right before or during her fight with Cheetah, where she's like limited in her abilities and then
or
he's
dying
like,
or something.
Dying, right, like very close to being defeated, and then he's like, this is the only way it's going to work, like, and then just he's gone, and then, you know, she suddenly gets her abilities back. That would have packed a much bigger punch, in my opinion, than the way that they did it. I mean, the way they did it still works, but it wasn't
but it's not the same as the first one did. Like, you know, because there was more at stake. Like, he was, you know, he had to blow up this plane that very well could have gave the Germans the win in World War I.
Right.
And he was the only one who could stop it. And it just, oh man, it was just gave me the feels. It was so well executed. There was more at stake, and it just that just in this movie, it just didn't work twice. It just didn't carry that same weight.
Well, yeah, like I was saying in the spoiler-free discussion, I think the stakes were different, and because they gave you a sense that the stakes were much bigger, that this sense of self-sacrifice was that much more powerful. And I think that you could have gotten that same sense if this self-sacrifice was maybe to save Diana's life, or maybe something close to that, you know, if you'd had the, you know, where he's just like making the ultimate sacrifice because he loves her or something like, you know what I mean? It would have been a completely different reaction, I think. And it would have been a much bigger scene than what it ended up being.
Yeah. Okay. I feel like I've pretty much nitpicked the hell of it, and I'm sure there's going to be other stuff I'm going to forget, but I feel like all my nitpicks are out there now, and I think I've not trashed the movie, but I picked on the movie enough. Now I want to take the opportunity to like really like, again, I want to put this where I really love the movie again. I love the story arcs and everything. I already got into that, but I love that White House fight. That White House action scene, with her teaming up with Steve and fight, you know, squaring up against Kristen Wiig. That was awesome. I really loved that. The whole White House setting almost felt like, you know, I'm getting flashback to X-Men where Nightcrawler's in the White House.
Yeah.
This had almost like that same magnitude, but better. I really loved that. That was such a great action scene and a really great setting and environment. I loved it. That might have been my favorite part of the movie, honestly, was that action scene alone there in the White House.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I'm sort of two minds with the action scenes, like both the White House scene and the mall fight scene. I think that the way that Gal Gadot commits to her level of fighting, it seems like what she's, the way that she's coming across in this movie versus the very first one is a much more confident, a much more experienced Wonder Woman.
Yeah.
Who's, using the tools that are at her disposal much more effectively, in a much more interesting manner, which to me is truer to the comic.
Yeah.
The other side of that is that I thought that some of that wire work looked a little unrealistic, and it kind of took me out of it. Like particularly like when the characters are being thrown and someone's falling, like the angles in which they're falling just seem a little unnatural, and the speed in which people are being thrown across a room just didn't seem it didn't work for me the same way that it did in the 2017 movie or in any of the other DCEU movies. And I don't know why it would be different here, but like for whatever reason that kind of took me out of those scenes.
Well, to counter everything that you just said here, in the first movie and in Batman v Superman, we see Diana fight with the sword and shield. At least this movie, we see her do more lasso fighting. Yes. Because in my mind, it was always the lasso. I mean, she's got the sword, especially in the New 52. It was always the sword, more so the sword and shield.
Right.
But at least in this movie, we get more lasso action, and that's what I appreciate about this movie more. This is what made the movie I like more than the other depictions of Wonder Woman in the first film and Batman v Superman. Is we see more lasso action. Not that she didn't use the lasso in the other movies I just mentioned, but there's more lasso. It's more prominent in this film, and I really appreciated that. And I actually did like the was it Cairo, the Cairo act, where they're in Egypt, where they're the car chase there.
Yeah, they were in Cairo.
I thought that was cool too. But again, it's just, like I said, there was more lasso in this movie, and that's one thing I appreciated more. I probably should have mentioned that in the spoiler freeze. There's more lasso action that we get. Now with the Snyder Cut coming out, maybe we'll get more lasso action then. But at least if we don't, at least Wonder Woman 84 is the movie that gives us Wonder Woman in her lasso and it's all its glory.
Yeah, and that part I do agree with. I mean, a big part of the comics is that, they sort of do a lot with the lasso of Hestia, and it's not just like this sort of lasso of truth that we saw like in the TV show and stuff like that. Yeah. It has multiple uses. It allows you to see things. You can use it to defend, you can use it to travel. There's like all these different things that it does for Diana. And I like that they incorporated a lot of that in this movie where we hadn't seen that in previous iterations of the character.
Yeah. That's basically all I got. I mean, so before we wrap this up in the bow, let's get into that mid-credit scene.
Right.
I like once the credits start rolling, the first thing I thought was, man, why didn't Linda Carter have a cameo? And then boom.
Yeah. So, I knew that she would. I knew that she would just based off of social media, because she was promoting Wonder Woman 84 hard. Like I actually follow her on Facebook, and like I was seeing tons of like Wonder Woman 84 stuff from her. And I was like, she's got to be in the movie. Like at some point, she's got to have some cameo. And I knew that she would.
So, but when the credits rolled, did you think the same thing? Like, oh man, it would be really great if we get a cameo from. And then we did, and it was really cool. By the way, I'm gonna say this again, Linda Carter, she looks fantastic. I mean, I was happy to see her, and it was really great. She's like, oh yeah, I've been doing this a long time, and da da da. It's like, I loved it. It put a smile on my face. That's good. It's good fan service for those diehard Wonder Woman fans and the Linda Carter fans. Like it was a really, really nice touch that they did it. Again, I'm kind of bummed out that there was nothing in there that's going to move the story forward. I was kind of hoping for like a Legion of Doom Easter egg or something. I didn't get that, but it was nice. Again, it was a nice touch seeing Linda Carter and that small little, appearance there. It was really refreshing to see. It really was. It put a smile on my face.
Yeah, I absolutely loved it. Like I said, I grew up with the original Wonder Woman TV series. Mm-hmm. She was actually the first superhero that I ever saw on TV. Like, the show came out, I believe, in 1975. I was 4 years old. And so seeing her on TV, and then later seeing like the Super Friends cartoon and some of the other things before I actually got into comic books, that was really my gateway into this entire thing. And so to see like one of my very first TV heroes and really my first like TV crush in the post-credit scene was great. It was a nice wrapping of the bow for this film, I thought.
Yeah, it was. It really was. I give this movie a solid 7.5 out of 10. I think the saving grace of this movie was, again, there's stuff that we complained about. The performances alone from Gal Gadot, Kristen Wiig, Pedro Pascal, again, Chris Pine again delivers. Patty Jenkins is great behind the camera. I feel like that was like really this movie's saving grace, is you have a great cast, great performances all around. It's just there's problems here and there that bugged the hell out of me, but I really felt like we needed this movie. We never really got Tenet tried, but we never got a true blockbuster this year. This was a great Christmas present from the movie gods, to say the least. And again, I enjoyed this movie, and I definitely plan on rewatching it. I cannot wait to our Wonder Woman 84 watch party on January 14th with Dion McGill of Off the Beaten Podcast and voice actor Matthew Farden. And we can definitely really get into it. I'm hoping we'll catch stuff that we didn't catch the first time. And it'll be really fun to really chop it up and get into it during the movie for sure. Right. And hope a lot of people can definitely join us on that.
Absolutely. I'm going to give this movie a solid 7 out of 10. And for anybody who reads my written reviews on Facebook, I normally grade those on an A through F. I'm going to give this a B minus. For me, this movie, it delivered. It was, a solid movie as far as action, as far as superhero movies. It gave me, almost everything that I could expect. But to me, it just really didn't measure up to the first Wonder Woman movie from Patty Jenkins in terms of its range of emotion, in terms of the overall story. To me, it didn't have that same strength level. But I will say this, that movie was very hard to top. And so, you got to kind of take that into account as well. And so, while I didn't think it was great, I really did think it was very good. And I would still recommend for anybody who hasn't seen this movie to go ahead and check it out on HBO Max.
Absolutely. So that being said, before we go, we ask you to please like, comment, subscribe, ring that bell, spread that shit like Slipper. So to USA, from Louisville to Syracuse, to all of our friends and fans around the world at NerdCage Live, enjoy life, stay safe, and good night.
Sayonara.
Ooh, trying to get out of the NerdCage, are ya? Well, before you go, hit that subscribe button. And if you're really intrigued, ring that bell. Thank you for dropping by. Until next time, tell everyone you know about NerdCage Live!